be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to the crowds, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden light." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise.
In celebrating the Feast of St. Ambrose and yesterday the Feast of St. Nicholas, both lived at relatively the same time when the Church was plagued by a struggle to understand who Jesus truly was and is. The phrase in the creed that we use, God from God, true God from true God, begotten not made, consubstantial with the Father. Those words are quite loaded with trying to resolve perhaps one of the earliest and strongest controversies in the Church, because it still arises today, called Arianism. And Arius would say that Jesus was not consubstantial with the Father, that Jesus was subordinate to the Father, he was a creature, that God created Jesus. We profess in the Creed, all things were created through him, and that God is three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, equal in dignity, equal in power. And so the subtleties, though, still arise sometimes where people say, well, Jesus was, he was a man who was, a great man, perhaps the greatest man who ever lived, but not God. And that's the big difference, that we profess the Trinity of persons, Father, Son, and Spirit, equal in dignity, each manifesting salvation and redemption in human history. We might say God, the Father, the Creator, Jesus, the Redeemer, the Holy Spirit, the Sanctifier. Those descriptions are given them, but not to separate them, because it's one process, one God, three persons. So Arius and his ideas still every once in a while crop up, and we have to proclaim the creed, and even though we might not understand every single bit of its subtleties, to make sure we understand what it excludes as much as it includes, and what it does include. Those great words penned at Nicaea, and I'm sure Ambrose had a part to, we believe in Jesus, who was true God from true God, begotten not made, consubstantial with the Father. Now going beyond that, we reach the readings of the day and continue to hear from Isaiah a God who is present to his people always, and in Jesus to bring comfort and serenity. Those who are farmers, and I've learned from the farmers I know that when this image is used of the yoke, take my yoke upon you, you don't use a yoke unless there are two animals. So a yoke is not for one, a yoke is for two, meaning that Jesus is sharing a yoke with us. And you never put two rookies on the same yoke, because they will go astray. You put a rookie with an experienced one, and they teach one another. So, in a sense, Jesus is inviting us to be taught and to have his assistance in bearing the burdens of life, and recognize, really, if we follow the Lord, how light some of our burdens can be. And we find, even though we make it, how difficult we make it for ourselves to be charitable, when once we are charitable, we recognize how light it makes us feel. There's a great deal of truth to that, to digging in and doing those things which at first you might think are not pleasant, but are so helpful that they lighten the burden not only of the other, but also of ourselves. May our Advent season continue to transform our lives.